Welcome back to part 3 of how to make a hex-based board game in Unreal Engine. Where we left off last time, the last two videos, is get the basic look of the map as a static mesh so you can kind of visualize it. And when you play the game, it actually spawns in the tiles from the spreadsheet that we created, which is what I've found to be the easiest way to kind of make maps and then import them in. In this video, we're going to work on actually setting up a lot of the behind the scenes game modes and the player controllers, everything that makes the game work. So we're going to set all that up, and then what I'd like to do, kind of pull up an example. This is the project I'm currently working on, and we won't get to this point here in this video, but we're working toward this. Is you can see player one, it's their turn, player two, it's not their turn. They can kind of fly around the map, and when they press spacebar, that ends their turn. And if I can flip over to the other one, that then shows up on the client side. So now it's the client's turn, they can do their actions, switch back and forth. So to do that, I created this blueprints folder. If you don't have this, create that. That's just where I like to hold things. And the first thing we're going to create is a player start. So blueprint class, players start, this one, and select, and we'll call this player start turn based. So by default, there's a player start, or likely is in your map. You can actually come in and remove this. I'm going to make a custom one instead, just so we have a little bit more control and can do some different things in there. So open it up, come into your event graph, and luckily this will be pretty simple. We are going to create a variable, and we'll call this player index, and switch this to an integer. And this is going to be instance editable, and you can make it private. So this will set, you'll basically, in a 4-player game, you'll have 4 spawn points, and so this will set which spawn point applies to which player when you actually start the game. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a function. We're going to call this get player spawn index, and we'll fill this out a little bit later. Let me see if we need anything else. We can make this appear. And the other thing, click this little button here to show advanced, and switch this to const. And we'll come back into this in a little bit once we get some more stuff set up. But we can drag this out. And actually, I'm going to have mine kind of float up like this. And within the details, how this will work is player 1 will be player index 0. Put that like that. And come off this one. And then player 2 will be player index 1. And move this over here. I'm just holding Alt and then pressing the line that duplicates it. This one over here. Rotate this around. So this will be player 3, which is index 2. Holding Alt, drag off this. Oh, the player 4 start here. So this is actually where the camera will spawn for the player. Okay, so with that out of the way, we will move on to the next couple things we need. Just grab my references quick. Okay, so right click, another blueprint class. This one we have to search for. Type in game mode. I want my caps on. And this is important, so make sure you don't miss this. There's a game mode base, which is also up here. That is not what we want. We want the one that just says game mode. And specifically, this behaves like a multiplayer match-based game, which is what we'll be making for this project. So click this one, not this one. And we'll call this GM turn-based. Create another blueprint. This will be our game state. And again, not the base, the one below it that says like a multiplayer match-based game. Call this GS turn-based. And after that, we will create another blueprint class, and this will be a player controller. And let's call this PC turn-based. Okay. I'm going to want to do one more thing here quick too. We'll come out back to our main menu. And if you don't have this widgets folder, just make this quick. And, oh, it looks like I already started making one. I'll delete this and restart. So make a widgets folder, come in here, right click, and under user interface, click widget blueprint, and we'll just call this HUD widget. So this will be what is actually appearing on your screen in game. And this will be pretty simple, at least to start, and we'll add in a lot more things later. But let's grab a border, put that on our canvas panel, and I'm just going to anchor this to the very top, get rid of our offset, maybe give this a size of 60, and under the brush, I'm going to give this some transparency, make it just a little bit darker. Yeah, I think that looks good. And within here, we'll make a text, drop that, and I'm going to set this to center and vertical alignment. And by default, I would say waiting for your turn. Oh, if I could spell turn. And I'm going to do one more thing quick. We're going to make a variable, call this turn text, and switch this to text. And by default, we'll just have it say this. So what will happen is when it is your turn, we'll switch what this text says. And so I'll grab this text and I'll bind it here. So when this variable changes, so when it's your turn, it'll say your turn. So we'll do some coding that'll change this, and that'll change it up here. But we'll come back to that later. Okay, we have our HUD, our player start. Now let's come back into our blueprints, and let's start first with the, actually before we do that, within your kind of map editor on the right, world settings, change your game mode override to your GM turn-based. We don't have a pawn yet, but we'll add that in later. HUD, player controller to PC turn-based, game state to GS turn-based. We don't have a player state. Okay, that's all fine. So by default, we'll be using those game modes. So it's right there. Okay, let's go into the game mode now. All right, we're gonna have to do a lot in here, but we're gonna have to kind of fill it in as we go because we'll need different codes and different things to get this all to work. But to start, right click and type in event on post login. So this does is when a new player joins the session, the lobby, the game, it'll run this event. And off of this, we'll say get num players. So this will just get the number of players in the game. And we'll pull off this. We'll do cast to PC turn-based. Clean this up a little bit. Okay. And now we're going to create a variable. And this variable will be PC list, we'll call it. And PC turn-based for the variable type, object reference. And instead of having this be a singular object, click it, and we're going to make it an array. So this, I'll show you, but as each player comes in, get it, type in add. We're going to add that player controller that logs into the game into this array. So think of it just as a list, so we can kind of reference it later as we go. And I think that might be as far as we can go with this line for now, but we'll come back to it. Okay, another custom event. This will just be called start game. And we'll do one more event, give ourselves some space, custom event, cycle turns. Now we got to create a couple functions. So our first function is going to be get initial spawn points. Okay. And how do I want to set this? I think all of this is good. Okay. And we're going to need another variable to run down this. And this variable is a little bit weird, but it'll make sense. So it's going to be called player spawn points. And start by setting this as an array or an integer, and then switch this to a map directory. No, yes, map directory. And the other piece we'll set as player start turn based. So basically, what this does is it matches. It's like two lists matching together. So it'll match the integer, which is this integer 0, 1, 2, 3 to the actual actor within the game, or the actual player start in game. So let's come back in here. So we'll drag off this. This all makes sense as we kind of build it out, and then I'll kind of explain at the end how it's all working. But get off this, type in length, and then equals 0. And from here, we'll do a branch. If true, get all actors of class. And the actor we're going to be looking for is our player start, turn-based. And we'll run a for each loop. Okay. And what to do? Yeah, okay, then we can pull right off this and get player spawn index. And then we'll grab our player spawn points, get add. Grab this. So we're gonna grab all the actors. So for us, we have 4. So we'll run this 4 times. And basically this is only gonna happen once at the very start of the game. Which is this 0. So basically it's saying if there's nothing in there, run this and just run it once. And I forgot to do one thing in here. All right, so flip back to your player start turn based. And this is going to be pretty simple. Grab your player index and come off this, type in return node, and drag this on to add a pin, or you can just add it here, your player index, pile save, come back to game mode. And now we have this available to us here. And so from here, we'll drag that. And we'll also drag this reference. So what this is doing is it's pairing the player index and the spawn point together into this, well, it's not an array. What is this called again? Map. In this map. And then the players, when they actually join the game, they can pull off this and get assigned a player index and then the corresponding spawn point. Okay, next we're going to do a override. So come to functions, hit override. You should have a choose player start. So click that, and now you'll have this category here, game. Just click that down, and let's open this up. So this is a default engine function, but we're overriding it to make it do what we want it to do. So from here, we'll pull our get initial spawn points, run this through. So this will actually run automatically when I think it's when a player joins the game. So we don't actually have to call it anywhere, but it'll run. So it's going to get the spawn points. And if it's already run, it won't rerun. But when the first player joins, i.e. the server, whoever's hosting the game, it'll run this once. And then we'll get number of players. Give ourselves some space. And pull in our player spawn points variable. We'll type in find. So for each number of players, we'll find the corresponding index within here, and then return the actual spawn point, and then go back to the return node. So when a player joins the game, this will run, and we'll get the spawn points from here, and then set which spawn point each player gets, and then return that out. Yeah, we'll come back to the game mode, but let's flip over to our player controller so we can start setting up some things there. Okay, let's skip right over to the event graph. So within the player controller, we're going to do a couple things off of the begin play. So first, we're going to do a check. Let's type in is local controller. Let's move this up. Branch. So if you don't really understand replication that well, I'll try to explain it quick, but I did do a video on it that I'll put in the description. But basically in a multiplayer game, there's the server and then there's the clients. But the way it works is you have a instance of yourself on the server and an instance of yourself in your local computer. And your local computer is what you're actually controlling things on. And when you do things, you need to send it to the server so the server knows and then can let everybody else know what's going on. So when this begin play runs, I guess maybe I can do this quick constraint. We'll do two. I'll flip this to a listen server. Within this print string, I'm just going to make this print for a little bit longer. Play. So the server comes in, and now there's server hello, client one hello. So what this means is this one is the server, right? And that comes in and says hello. But this one comes in and has two instances, one on the server and one on the client. So the reason we're doing this check is you can only add widgets to the client side. So that's what this check is doing. And so if it is locally controlled, if it is the instance that's on your computer that you're playing from, then we'll create a widget. And that widget will be our HUD. And our owning player will be self. And then we will add that to the viewport. And I'm also just going to make this a reference. So promote the reference. Let's call this HUD. And we'll set that. And after that, do one more thing. We're going to do a switch. Has authority. So what this is doing is now it's doing the opposite. I'm actually going to drag this all the way down. So this is basically, it's essentially doing the reverse, but a little bit different. But the client, do you have authority on the server? So can you do things directly to the server, or do you have to pass events directly to the server? Are you operating on the server? And all the clients will have an instance on the server and an instance that is not on the server. And the game mode only exists on the server. So what this is basically doing is if we create the HUD and we need this false to come through so the server instance can make its way, it's going to check, now do you have authority to the server? Can you interact with the server? And the client won't be able to, but their server instance will be able to. I hope that makes sense. It gets a little complicated, but that's the basics. Let's type in get game mode. And from here, we're going to cast to game mode third person or turn-based. So if we do have authority, we'll cast to it, and we'll promote this to a variable. We'll just call this game mode turn-based. I'm going to make this replicated. So only the server will get the game mode, but from there, we'll set it as a variable and we'll replicate it. So what replicated means is when a variable is set on the server, the client, it also gets set on the client. So now the client can interact with the game mode because the server instance of that player set it for them. That's all we'll do on this line of code. And then we need to make a custom event. And this will be set player index. This will come from our game mode. Make an input, an integer, player index. And this event is going to run on the server. We'll make it reliable so it always runs. And from here, you can right click this, hit promote the variable, player index. And we need this to be replicated. So again, the server or the game mode will tell the player what their player index is. So are you player 1, 2, 3, or 4? And then it'll be run on the server, set on the server, and then replicated so the client also knows what index they are. Let's put some comments around this. Then play and set player index. Okay. And we're going to make a couple more events. Start turn client. And this will run on the owning client. So we'll make this reliable. So the server runs on the server. Obviously, this is going to run on the owning client, and we'll make a couple functions off this. But what we'll do then is this is what will actually be dictating what this text is for the HUD. So start player turn. We'll make another one. Custom event end turn client. And again, we'll run this on the owning client and reliable. And then we're going to make a function. I'll call that set my turn. And within this function, we have an input that will be a Boolean. Let's call it my turn. And we'll make a variable off this. And this will set, is it our turn or not? And then we have to do an event dispatch, which I'm trying to remember if I do that. Yeah, we do in the player controller. Okay. Event dispatch on my turn changed. And I think we can, yeah, call this here. And this event dispatch, how do I set the variable? Oh yeah, up here. So top right inputs, make a Boolean, my turn, question mark. Let me just double check we don't need to do anything else with the event dispatch. Okay, that looks good. And let's pass this through. Okay, I figured it out. A little buggy. So just delete it. We're going to have to remake it. So create the event dispatch. Call it on my turn changed. Compile it. Add in the input. My turn. Compile, save, and now drag it out. For whatever reason, if it's already being called and you haven't added in the input, then it gets all buggy. So we have to add the input in first, compile it, save, and drag it out. And then drop that here. Okay. And come back to our event graph. So when it is our turn, let's come off this event and we'll click my turn. And when it's not our turn, let's come off this and end our turn. And then we're going to flip over to the HUD and go into the graph. And let me just pull up my reference. Okay, so let's get this stuff out of the way. Okay, so right click, get owning player. And we'll cast to PC turn-based. And we'll promote that to a variable, PC turn-based. And then we're going to, actually, I think you have to drag off this one, bind event to on my turn changed. So basically what this is doing is anytime this event is run here, it'll automatically run it here into our HUD, which is nice. And we'll create a custom event and call this on my turn change. Now with this little red box, drag that up to the bind. And then we actually need to do something with this event. Okay. And so we need the variable, which I can't set. So let's try this again. Custom event on my turn changed, change, and input my turn. Compile, save, and now I think this should work. There we go. Okay. And we are going to do a select. No, or is it select? Select text, maybe. I think. Actually, come off this, drag and set, and then pull off this and select. Yeah, there we go. Okay. And then flip this to a Boolean, drag this in. And so if it's not our turn, just copy this over. We want this text to read, waiting for your turn. And when it is our turn, type in your turn. And we can pass that through. So how this will work is, we haven't done the logic in the game mode yet, but the game mode will tell the player controller, is it your turn or not? And we'll set that Boolean to yes or no. And that'll run through here. And it'll run the event dispatcher, which will then run the event to here. And then it will flip if true, say it's your turn, if false, say waiting for your turn. And that will change the text here. I don't know if we need to do this, but we will anyways. Let's make an event destruct. And we can get our player controller reference and just hit unbind event from on my turn change. So if a player leaves or for whatever reason, if we choose to remove their HUD, you'll just get rid of that event dispatch, so it's not running in the background. Let's drag this over. Okay. And I think that's all we need to do in the HUD for now. Okay, so now let's go back to our turn-based game mode and finish building the rest of this. All right, so let's start with is there anything else we need to do on, yeah, okay. So our event on logon. So when we add our new player controller to this array, we are going to, off this cast, set player index. This here. And make it look nice. And the way we're going to get the index is off the number of players. But the way arrays typically work is they start at 0. So they go 0, 1, 2, 3. So similar logic to how we have this set up. Right? Player 1 is actually player index 0. Player 2 is actually player index 1, and so forth. So this is always just going to return. It will really never return 0 because it'll only run when somebody joins. So when somebody joins, they will be a player. So player 1 will come in and only get number of players, but it'll return that as 1. But really we want their player index to be 0. So come off this and just hit minus integer, -1, and now set that as the player index. So player 1 comes in, there's 1 player, subtract 1, and they're going to be player index 0. Player 2 comes in, there's 2 players, subtract 1, player 2 will be player index 1. Hopefully that makes sense. And then after this, come again, get num players. And for this, we're going to do a equals, and then a branch. And we're going to promote this equal to as a variable, and we'll type this as number of players for game. So this will be the number of players you need to start the game. So for us in this 4-player map, we're going to do 4. And if true, we're just going to do a slight delay of 1 second. The reason I do this is because the client will join via the session first, but the actual client index will be lagging a little bit behind. And so if you don't have this delay, some of the code will run before the client even exists in the game. Their server instance will be, but not the actual client. And so then it can just get kind of buggy and things don't set right. So I like to just do this little delay just to make sure everything kind of essentially loads in. And then off here, we'll type start game, which is this event here. So as players are joining, we know how many players are in the game. And if that number of players equals the number of players we need for the game, start the game. And obviously, this is dependent on how many games you want or how many players you want in your game. And this can be set later on if you're going to have like 1v1v1s and 4-player or 1v1s. And then this variable can just change. Okay, and then for our start game, we're going to have to make a macro for this. Okay, so this macro will be called player in turn. And I'll pull this up. Okay, relatively simple. And for this, we're going to have an output. And this will be the PC turn-based. Let's call it player controller. So we're going to get which player is currently active for their turn. And we'll make another variable. We'll call this current player's turn. And this will be a singular variable, an integer. Default to 0 is fine. And so off the array, we'll hit get, and then we'll get the variable. So we'll set this as we kind of go, so whichever player index's turn it is, and we'll get that from the player controller array and then pass that through. And these player controllers are getting added when they join the game here. And they're getting added as 0, 1, 2, 3 for a 4-player game. So back to our start game, pull in this variable. So this will get the player whose turn it is, and by default, that'll be player index 0, which is player 1. And then we'll do start turn client. Okay. And we'll grab our player controller list. I'll do a for each loop. And actually, we're not going to do this yet. We'll come back to this. This is in my game, I'll show you. In my HUD, there's just a player list here, so we'll add that in later, but we won't do that in this video, but we'll do in future ones. So you can leave the logic here. We'll come back to it later, but we don't need it for this part. Okay. So after that, we'll do the cycle turn logic. So again, we get the player in turn. So when we're cycling turns, so the player whose turn it is ends their turn. We then want them to end turn client. So this is both of these events are running back to our player controller and then setting it to the HUD. And now we will actually set whose turn it is. So we have the current player in turn. We'll add 1. So if it was player index 0's turn, we'll add 1, so now it'll be player index 1. And we're going to have to do some logic here to kind of set this appropriately. So let's see this one. Yeah, okay. So kind of actually have to do another one of these. This will make sense at the end. So player intern +1, and then again +1. It's really two, but we do need two separate steps here. I'll show you why. And then is greater than, and then grab number of players of the game, and then hook this up. Let's drag this like this. So what this is saying is if the player who, so let's say player 4 ends their turn, which they would be player index 3. So if we set that to 4, so if it's player 4's turn, their player index is 3, right? Because 0 is player 1, index 1 is player 2. So index player 3 is the 4th player. So this player's turn index would be 3. And so if we add a 1 to that, that would then be player index 4. But we don't actually have 4 player indexes. Well, we have 4, but not the number 4, because we have 0, 1, 2, 3. So what this logic is basically doing is it's just saying, has this reached the max? And if it has reached the max, then reset this to 0. If it hasn't, so if it's still below the number of players in the game, then just set it to this. So I hope that makes sense. It's just how arrays work with it starting at 0. We have to set these checks to then make sure that, right, because if we're always adding 1, it'll go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And obviously we're only going to have indexes 0, 1, 2, 3. So basically if it gets past 3 and tries to go to 4, we want it to actually go back to 0, so it resets the loop. Hopefully that makes sense. And then we'll grab our player intern and player or start turn client and connect both of these. So when the player ends their turn, it'll cycle the turns. It'll end their turn because they're the player intern, and then we'll figure out, well, whose turn is it next? And that player index will be set here. And from this function, we'll get the appropriate player controller from that index and then pass that back through and then start their turn. Yeah. And let me see if there's anything else we got to do in here. Cycle turns, good, start turn. Okay, perfect. Okay. And I think we can check. Let's bring this up to 4. Everybody should be spawning in the right place. So missing 1. Yeah, here we go. Okay. Yeah, so yeah, it looks like everybody has gotten a spawn point, so it's good. But we can't move. Oh, we can move. Huh, I'm surprised we can move. Okay, that's good. I thought we'd have to do some, we still do have to do some stuff, but we'll come back to that. We do have an error. Kill. Let me look at this quick. Okay, I figured out that error. And it's not really an error, it's just when you're closing the editor, but to fix it, so we had this set up like this before. If right click it and do convert to a validated get, that creates this. And then just pull off the is valid. So that'll get rid of that error. And another mistake I realized is in our turn text, I had you guys type this in here, but really this has to go down here. So now when you launch, everybody should have something up here, right? And your one that says server, that should say your turn. The other thing, you guys might have a bare map, like bare, nothing in it. So just to kind of, I'm just going to add something in, and you can do this too, just to make sure your spawn points are adding correctly. But we'll add this cube in. And now, oh, why is that in the editor? New window. So you can see, right, everybody is spawning in a different point, right? For this guy that keeps over there, this one keeps over there, keeps straight across, keeps in front. So you should have a result like this where everything is spawning in their appropriate index. And get rid of that cube. Okay, next we're going to come back to our player controller, and we're actually going to start doing the turn cycling. Within our event graph, I want to remember how I did this. Okay, let's drag this out. So right click and type in spacebar. For me, this is going to be what ends the turn. And later we can add in buttons into the HUD, but for testing purposes, spacebar is nice and easy. And we'll grab this variable, my turn. Press this. So if you press this and it is your turn, then we're going to run an event. The event we're going to run, make a function, handle end turn, and come back here, drag this into the true. And I should do one more thing. In our event graph, right under this custom event, action end turn server. And this will run the server and be reliable. Because when you push the spacebar, that's done locally, right? Any of your input keys are done locally. So this is all being done on the client side. So all this function is going to do is it's just going to run the event action end turn server. So then it's telling the server we're ending our turn. And then from here, we can get our game mode reference, which we set back on our begin play. And from that, we can do cycle turn, or turns. So now when we press this, we'll run this series of events. And in theory, this should all work. So let's test it out. Okay, it's this guy's turn. I hit spacebar. And we kind of get this lined up better. It's this guy's turn, spacebar, this guy's turn, and so on. And it cycles correctly. Perfect. Okay, good. Well, that's a good start. I think there's one more thing I want to do, and then we'll end the video. So let's come back to our blueprints, and I want to make a, I think it's a blueprint. Yeah, blueprint pawn turn-based. The reason I was surprised that you can actually navigate around in this is because we haven't actually made the pawn. But this actually works really well. Oh, what is this? I don't know what this is. This must be from player start, but don't see anything in here. It's actor hidden in game. Let's see if that gets rid of it. This is the player controller. I'll look out at that offline. I have no idea what this. Well, actually, okay, I do know what it is. It's the. Okay, it's because we don't have a pawn. So it's just defaulting to a cube, I think. But this will actually be what actually controls our movement, and you can tailor it in here. So that's why we create this. We're going to make a component loading pawn movement. And let me look what settings I used in my project. Looks like I left most of this on default, actually. So, too easy. Okay. So on the, let's see, let's move this up, this here, and put this here. Okay. So on begin play, get controller, and cast to PC turn-based. And we'll promote that to a variable, PC turn-based. Okay, so when we begin play, let's get who our actual controller is. And we gotta do some logic in here because the whole way this game will work is you have a cursor, right? You can select units, tell them where to move. So that logic will actually be done. Part of that logic will be done in our pawn. So let's start first with the cursor, which go back to your player controller in class defaults and search cursor and enable that. And now, yeah, when you're in game, your cursor is showing, whereas before it wasn't. And come back to the pawn. So for the pawn off the event tick, we're going to get a variable, right mouse button down, question mark. If this is true off of a branch, we'll get our player controller and set mouse position. Right click, get viewport size. And I think, yeah, split this and this will, what's that called? Oh, is it just float by float? Oh yeah, we're just doing division. Not overly complicated. Divide both these by 2. So I'll explain what this is doing at the end, but really the way you will turn is by, and it's working by default, but you can see like as you hold your right mouse button and you turn, your cursor kind of goes all over the place. So this will kind of lock your cursor in the middle, and it's just kind of a quality of life thing. Okay, and then in the pawn, we will do input axis movement forward and input axis movement right. And input axis up. Oh, this might be something we have to set. Check my project settings quick. Inputs. Yeah, okay. So basically we're setting this is what's going to set the controls. So go to project settings and inputs and our bindings, open this up and this, okay. So if you expand all these, right, W, S, forward, back, I think that makes sense. A, D, movement left, right, that makes sense. But we don't have a movement up. So make a new one, move up. And for me, I'm going to do keyboard E, which will be my up, and then Q will be my down. Okay. Now we come back to our pawn. Input, axis, move, up. So when you actually press those buttons on your keyboard, that is what will run here. Yeah. Okay. And off of these, we're going to make a variable. We're going to call this camera speed. Make that a float. And by default, I think I'm going to set mine to something like 1,000. So the reason we're doing this, I don't know, you might be saying, well, this works fine. Yeah, but this mouse is annoying and we don't have any control over the speed or really anything. So we're basically kind of recreating that, but that'll give us a lot more customization later on. So yeah, I think it's important to do. So come off this and multiply by float. Grab our camera speed. And come off this, add movement input. Our scale value will be that. Let's give us a little bit more space and right click, get actor forward vector. Okay, and we can basically, well, at least copy some of this for these other two. This will be get actor right vector. And this will work for forward, back, left, and right, even though it just says right. Left is included. Left is just a negative of right, is the way it looks at it. And then for our up, you know, what's also nice about this too is you can create additional inputs. Like if you wanted like tilt the camera up or down, you could add in those input keys here as well. Search vector up. Okay. And we just got a couple more things to do, and then we'll probably never come back into this again. Right mouse button. Okay, so when we press the right mouse button, which this is what's going to be the thing that controls your, looking around. So the first thing we're going to do is, because as we're turning now, this mouse is all over the place, it's just kind of weird. We're going to get our player controller. So when we're holding the mouse button down, set show mouse cursor, we're going to turn it off. So now when we're looking around, but it's not doing it. Why isn't it doing it? Look at my other project. Yeah, so this is how I want it to look. See, the mouse isn't anywhere. We come back, and it responds to its last position, but oh, duh, we're not using the pawn. All right, so come back into your editor and switch your pawn class to turn-based pawn. And I'm gonna restart this. So you should be able to move around now. Ooh, something's a little weird though with the up-down. What went wrong? What did I do? Just look. Oh, okay. Yeah, in here. So for me, E, I want to be up, and Q, I want to be down, but it's scale. Both of these scales are 1. So like if you look at forward, back, right? Forward W is scale 1, back is S, and scale -1. So all we need to do for the Q is -1. And now when you come back in, E, Q, forward, back, left, right. And when we hold the right mouse button, our cursor goes away, but we're not actually turning. And that's what we're going to work on here next. But our cursor disappeared, which is good. So let's continue on with this code. The delay is going to be 0. I don't know why, that when I learned how to do this, for whatever reason, I don't know, it breaks if you don't have this in there, even though it's 0. So I don't know, just add it in there. Maybe we'll test it after and see if it breaks anything without it. And we'll set this to on. And then we'll get our player controller, get mouse position, and we're going to make a new variable. This will be called mouse save position. Int point. So what this is doing is, the way I want it to work is, so your cursor never disappears. So when we're right clicking, and this is in the project I'm working on, right? We're turning the camera, but the mouse cursor is actually still moving around. But, right, so if I kind of put it on this fence here, right, and move around, it comes back to where it was relative to my screen. So if you don't do this logic, what can happen is as you're turning, your mouse cursor is moving left, 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 and it can actually move completely off your screen onto a different monitor or something else, and then just screw things up. So what we're doing is when we press it, we're going to set the location of the mouse when we pressed it, and then when we unpress it, we're going to set it back. So that will kind of prevent some of those weird bugs that could happen from that. So when we press the right mouse button down, we're going to get rid of our cursor, and we're going to save that location. And when we release it, come in off this, set this back to off, because it's no longer, your right mouse button is no longer down. And we'll get our player controller. We're going to reset the mouse position. So pull off this set mouse position. And we'll pull in our variable. And split this. And then connect these here. And again, we have to do this weird delay. 0. Oops. And we can just copy this. And I'll turn the mouse back on. We're not going to be able to turn yet, but I'm holding my right mouse button, cursor's gone. And when I release it, it didn't come back on because I didn't turn that on. So make sure you turn this on. Now when we come back in, there it is, right? So I put it down by these trees, boom, comes back. Even though I'm moving my mouse right now, it comes back. If we don't do that, so if I just kind of disconnect this and bypass this. So here's my cursor on this object, moving it around, right? And now it's moving. And so what can happen is it can move completely off your screen. So that's what we are doing this to avoid. All right, it's a long video, but we're almost there, guys. We're just going to set our turn rotation, and then we'll call it for this one mouse X. And no, not yet. Mouse X. This one under mouse events, and mouse Y. This one. And for both of these, I'm going to get this, and we're only going to do, so this is X would be left to right as you move your mouse, Y up, down. So we're only going to run these events if we're actually holding our mouse button down. And let me spread this out a little bit. And then add controller, yeah. So if true, pass this through, then add controller pitch and pass this through. And now when we're in game, oh, mine is inverted. But I can, oh, okay. Couple things. Come back to player controller, or maybe it's the, yeah, within the pawn, click on the base actor and switch these two on. Okay, this should, okay, it's still inverted, but I'm moving around the map as I would like. But why am I inverted? Oh, okay. So for me, I'm inverted. It's like, flying a plane, which maybe is how you want it, but it's not how I want it. So to fix that, multiply by float, and we'll flip this to -1, and then pass that through. Okay. Server can fly. Client can fly. Press spacebar as a client, nothing happens. Press as the server, ends his turn. This guy goes, boom. Okay. Well, that was a long video. Thanks for sticking around. If you have any issues, put some comments down below, and I'll be sure to get to them to try to help you troubleshoot. I think next, what I want to do is actually start getting into more of the fun stuff, and that's units. So we'll work on unit spawns. So get them to spawn. So initial units, if you're going to start with some units on the map where they spawn, and then we'll actually get into moving units across the map. And then after that, we can do battles and attacking and, resource management and all the fun stuff. But we've got a lot of the guts of this thing built, the framework. So we're in a good place, and these videos will be a lot more fun, I hope, going forward. But yeah, please like and subscribe, and like I said, leave some comments, and I'll help you out. Thanks.